I'm Hillary Mulick and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm a wedding photographer based in South Carolina, and this episode, the first episode of the new year, I'm going to be talking about all my favorite books that I read this last year in 2023. So if you have been following my channel for a while, you know that I'm a really big reader, and last year I did a my favorite books of 2022 video, which I'll post down below if you're interested in that. And this year I thought it'd be fun to do another video of my top favorite books that I read in 2023. I record all of my books on Goodreads, so in 2023, I read over 80 books, and I think I read over 80 books in 2022 as well. So this year, I've picked my top 8 favorites that I wish I could read again for the first time because they were so good, and I wanted to share them with you today on this video. Now, these books are in no particular order. I just went through all of my books that I read in 2023 and just picked a few of my favorites, but I have tons of books that I read this last year that were 5 out of 5 for me that were so good, but just these ones were the ones that stood out the most that if I could read again for the first time, I totally would. So book number 1 is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. It's a second chance romance, and if you know me, I love me a good romance. So this is a second chance romance about Macy and Elliot, and the chapters switch back and forth between them as adults, which is present day, and then them meeting as kids and kind of growing up together and their friendship developing, and then as they get older, a more romantic relationship developing. And I just loved following it. It was so good, and it was so emotional. Some good spice in there as well, and I just highly recommend it. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Book number 2 is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this book, I was surprised how much I liked it because this is not a romance book. It's following the character Carrie, who has been a retired tennis pro for 6 years. And she decides to come out of retirement to take back her world records. And I just loved the drama of tennis and just her retraining, and it also does a few flashbacks of how she got into tennis and her dad training her and how she won her world records to begin with, which was so interesting. I also really love this book because you don't have to know anything about tennis to really like this book. I don't know anything about tennis, and I was captivated. It was so good, and I think Taylor Jenkins Reid does a really good job of writing about characters that just feel so real. Like, I really thought as I was reading this that Carrie Soto was a real person, and she's definitely a fictional person. So it was so fun to read. Highly recommend Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Book number 3 that I recommend is The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This is a sports romance about a girl who needs a place to stay. What is her name? Her name is Indy, and she needs a place to stay, and who better to stay with than her best friend's brother, who is NBA star Ryan Shea. And I just love, this is a romance. I love the close proximity trope. There's also a fake dating trope in there that I thought was really well done. This is actually book 2 in this sports romance series. You don't have to read book 1 to know anything about book 2 if you're okay with a few spoilers. Basically, book 1, it's called The Mile High, which is also really good, but I just read it in a previous year, which is why it's not in this video. But Mile High was really good. It is actually about Ryan Shea's sister, and it's a hockey romance. And then book 2, which is The Right Move, which is what I'm recommending, is about her brother, Ryan Shea, and her best friend and their little romance that is going on. And I actually just recently read the 3rd one in this series. It came out towards the end of 2023, which is also really good. But honestly, all 3 of these sports romance books were so good. The first one is A Mile High, second one is The Right Move, and the 3rd one is All Caught Up. Such a good, fun sports romance series, and spice is 10 out of 10. Book number 4 is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. It's basically vampires meets The Hunger Games. It is very much a fantasy book with some spice and some romance in there as well. The book is about a human named Aurea who has been raised by a vampire, and she decides to enter this tournament where the winner at the end of the tournament gets a wish granted by the goddess of death. And Aurea's wish is to become a vampire like her father. And in this tournament, it's basically fight to the death. And in the tournament, she decides to ally herself with this really dangerous vampire named Rain. And her idea is he is her biggest competition. So she's going to ally with him until the last minute when it's just the two of them, and then they will turn against each other. This book was so good. I loved the fantasy aspect of it. I loved the Hunger Games meets vampires aspect of it. It's definitely an enemies to lovers trope if you're a romance fan, and highly recommend. And spice was 10 out of 10. Book number 5 that I'm recommending is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. It was surprising how much I liked this book because it's a YA novel, and I don't read a lot of YA novels. This is also a mystery mixed with a little bit of romance. It's a YA novel, so not spicy, but definitely some romance. The main character's name is Signa, and basically she is orphaned as a child, and through a series of events, she can see ghosts. She can also communicate with death because death is a person that she can communicate with. So growing up, she's been passed around from relative to relative, and she ends up at a household estate called Thorngrove. And her aunt has recently passed at Thorngrove through some weird things that people think that she was murdered. And so Signa, with Death as her partner, is trying to investigate the death of her aunt. And it was really fun to follow along Signa and Death and uncovering all of these secrets of Thorngrove, and then also a budding romance in the book. It was surprisingly really good, and I loved it. Highly recommend. Book number 6. If you know me, you know me. I love the author Abby Jimenez, and her new book this year, Yours Truly, was so good. I loved it. This book is about a woman named Brianna, who is a physician at a hospital. She is just finalizing a divorce, and her brother is on the kidney transplant list. He's waiting for a kidney. And this new hire, Jacob, at the hospital, Brianna and Jacob start exchanging letters back and forth and kind of developing this friendship. And as Jacob gets to know Brianna, he decides to donate his kidney to her brother. And this book was so sweet. I love the banter between them both. I listened to this book, highly recommend the audiobook, because each of the chapters switch back and forth between Brianna and Jacob's POVs, which I love books that do that, where you get both perspectives and you're not only following one person the whole time. So it was so good. Fake dating trope, if you are a romance reader. Spice is 10 out of 10. It was just hilarious and emotional and so good. I love everything that Abby Jimenez writes. So highly recommend Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Last book I'm going to recommend, book number 7, is called Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And this is also a YA novel. So good. I was surprised how much I loved this book, and also just continually thinking about this book. This book is a duology, and the second book is supposed to come out this year in 2024, which I am ecstatic about because I cannot stop thinking about this book. So this book is about, the two main characters are Iris and Roman, and they both work at a paper together, and they're rivals. They're kind of battling for the same job at work. And kind of what's going on in Iris's life is her mother is an alcoholic, her brother is off to war, and so she comes home. This is kind of a period novel. with also a little bit of fantasy wrapped in there as well. But she goes home after long days at work and she writes her brother, and she doesn't know where to send these letters that she types up on her typewriters. So she just slips them under the door in her closet and just tells herself, I think it's almost therapy. Like she writes these letters on her typewriter to her brother and then slips them under her closet door and then just feels better after doing that. Well, little does she know, her typewriter is a magical typewriter, and her letters are being sent to Roman, her rival at the paper. Of course, Roman knows it's her letters right away, but he decides to not tell her that he knows that it's her, and he decides to write her back. And they start to develop this friendship over writing each other on their magical typewriters and sending their letters back and forth through the closet doors. So basically, they forge a connection and it follows them all the way to the war front because there's a war going on. I think of this book as You Got Mail and then add in a war going on top of that, which is crazy. It's just so good. You have to read it, and highly recommend it. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, 10 out of 10. So that was it. Those were my top 7 books that I just absolutely loved that I read in 2023. There were lots of other books that I rated 5 out of 5 that I enjoyed immensely. And if you want to look at that list, you can go to the link in my description to check that out on my Goodreads account. But out of all the books that I read in 2023, these were the 7 that I just felt really hit me the most and that I can't stop thinking about. And if they were part of a series, I was super excited to keep going along with the series. And I highly recommend all of these books. If you really liked this video, or if you have any comments about any of the books that I recommended, if you've read any of these books, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. I always love meeting fellow readers, especially if you're a fellow fantasy or romance reader, because I can read all the fantasy and romance. So good. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you again next week for another YouTube episode. Bye, guys.